Okay, this is a video about my return visit to Lancaster University 25 years after I left in 1988. I was there from 1985 to 1988, and it's about how much the university has changed since I was there in the 1980s, and it may be of interest to anyone else who was there in the 80s or maybe the 90s as a student. And the university's changed quite a lot since then. And one of the first things I noticed that was different is the residences. Virtually all of the old residences have simply been knocked down over the years and completely rebuilt. These you can see here are the new Furness College residence. I was a student in Furness College, and I was a history student and studying in the history department, which was in Furness College, but is now in Bowland College. They've moved the entire department to Bowland. And the residences that we lived in were about 3 stories high and were a bit basic, but they did the business. And they have been replaced by these ghastly carbuncles that you can see here. They're massive multi-storey things, and I'm sure they're very nice inside, but they look completely and utterly soulless from the outside. And totally kind of oversized and impersonal. And these are actually some of the nicer new residences. Looking at some of the other colleges, particularly the kind of massive great new bit that they've built on the end near to what was Pendle College, you know, which are horrible kind of things. You know, these actually look quite relatively nice. One thing I noticed about the whole university was how many of these kind of big new plastic looking buildings have been thrown up. Probably to do with computer sciences or whatever, but there's masses of new thumping great buildings around the place, most of which seem to have been built with no regard whatsoever for the original architecture of the university. They're not even built out of brick. I mean, I haven't even bothered to photograph them, they're so horrible, but they're kind of orange and black plastic looking square things. But anyway, these are the new residences. Furness College itself, which is now a medical school, it's not got the history department in it anymore, has been completely revamped and refurbished. You know, the fountain area, which you can see here, is pretty much the same, but inside has been completely done out. This is the old foyer of Furness College, and it now looks like something out of 2001: A Space Odyssey, with these kind of glowing red chairs in it and so on. It's been completely refurbished, not at all like it used to look years ago. One thing that is the same is that the manky little chip shop oddly has survived. All the revamping that occurred over the years, this kind of chip shop is still here, and inside looks pretty much the same as it did back then. Anyway, what else still looks pretty much the same? Well, Alexander Square hasn't changed much. It's been paved in the middle, and there's now a kind of big learning suite at the far end near Bowland College, where there used to be a walkway. But generally speaking, this looks pretty much like it did back then. And so does the drive area, and so does the chaplaincy area, chaplaincy centre area, which was a car park then, and it's sort of pretty much a car park now. You know, there's lots of things that have changed, but the main thing is the residences and the new buildings. Now we move on to Morecambe, which hasn't changed hardly at all since I remember it in the 1980s, which is probably a bad thing, considering how it was an utter dump then, and it's pretty much an utter horrible dump now by the look of it. You know, the bay's nice, you can see Morecambe Bay and the promenade area, but once you actually get from the bay and the promenade into Morecambe, it's pretty much the same dump that it was back then. There seem to be a few more second-hand bookshops around, which nobody seemed to be visiting, just walking past. And it's run down still, it's grotty looking, but then it always was. This is Albert Road, where I lived for a year, number 11 Albert Road, which you know, you can see here with a green front door. If I remember rightly, it had a white front door back in the day, and was a horrible grotty house let to students. It had moving walls, rising damp, mould on the bedroom walls, strange yellow liquid dripping through the ceiling. You name it, it was wrong with it. Presumably it's been done up inside. The electrics were dangerous back in the day, but I imagine that's all been done out. But it still looks pretty much a run-down dump from the outside. And the back area was a scummy yard with a mouldy mattress in it, and that still looks like a pretty kind of rough back area there. So Morecambe, of all the places where I lived when I was at uni, seems to have changed the least. Now we move on to Galgate, where I lived for a year as well when I was at university. This is the house I lived in at Galgate. It was called Hurstwood. It's now called Hurstwood Farm, and it's part of a massive great mushroom farm that used to be next door to it, which is now extended into the old house as well. The university has obviously sold Hurstwood off to the mushroom farm. It's no longer a student accommodation house, and presumably people live there, work at the mushroom farm, because the mushroom farm seems to have extended into its back area around the house. And otherwise it pretty much looks the same as it did then. Galgate is still a nice little place. It was back then. This here used to be the pub at Galgate, the main pub at Galgate, called the Green Dragon. It now isn't a pub. It's one of those awful kind of petite little tea rooms, you know, with kind of twee decor inside and so on. You know, it's still pretty much the same, but it's not the pub anymore, which is a shame really, because it was a good pub. And this is the walk from Galgate back to the university, and you know, here you can see some final pictures of the university. I mean, the main thing that has changed is the new buildings, but I haven't got many pictures of them, simply because they're so hideous. They have to be seen to be believed. Great plastic orange things. And the history department seemed to have moved into Bowling College and put into tiny little white kind of horribly clinical looking rooms. You know, the lecturers seem to be stuck in rooms where there's hardly room to swing a cat, and let alone stack all their books up and so on. And it all looks incredibly clinical. But anyway, I suppose times move on. Anyway, thanks for listening.